pandemic. We have a very special guest with us tonight that I think you're going to really enjoy. We as parents are dealing during this pandemic with tremendous amounts of challenges. And you're seeing the media fill us with tons of articles and information on why our kids are being deprived of social connections due to the remote learning that many are doing and social distancing that we're all doing from away from our families and friends. And I really believe that tonight's special guest will truly impact us all, provide us with some really great knowledge and tips as we as parents are kind of getting through this difficult time. We're very lucky to have her as a subject matter expert at ESF. She's an ESF camp parent. She actually was a former ESF team member back when she graduated from high school and going to college, worked as a counselor. She was one of our best. And she's the founding director of the OCD and Anxiety Institute and research investigator at Children's Hospital Philadelphia. She has been involved in some of the most important research trials in the fields of childhood anxiety and OCD. And throughout the past decade, her career spans. Dr. Khanna is a pioneer in web-based mental health research for anxiety disorders. You can find her online programs to help children and parents manage stress and anxiety on her website, which is www.copingparents.com, which we'll send out to everyone. She has a self-help book for children, the Worry Workbook for Kids, which is available at Amazon and includes activities your children can do at home. And she's also producing a new book as we speak, the resiliency recipe, which will be coming out this summer, which we're going to be able to hopefully send some copies around to anyone who would like it. We're really excited to have Dr. Khanna with us. And I'd like to also introduce my colleague who will be facilitating tonight, Mr. Steve Robertson. And Muniya, thank you so much for coming.
Thank you so much for having me. It's really a pleasure. I'm so glad to be here and to answer questions. So thanks for the invitation.
Thank you. Steve, I'd love to turn it over to you.
Thank you so much. Dr. Khanna, we're excited to have you here. We've been speaking to parents over the last year, even 18 months, and there's just so many questions seemingly unanswered in so many cases. And parents are, including myself, are always really open and interested to hearing from experts like you. And in the times I've had an opportunity to connect with you, not only are you a thought leader, but you're very thoughtful about how you share information and give feedback. So I'm really excited. We've got a couple of questions that have already been sent in to us by participants that I would ask you to just address. But just before we dive into that, maybe you can just spend a minute or two and even just set the scene, give us a thought, background, anything just to help set the scene before we dive into a couple of questions. At the end, if we have time, we'll also take some additional questions as they get sent forward to us, if there are any.
So to set the scene, I think what I'll say is that we've all been learning a lot these last 18 months. So the scientific community continues to learn, and I as a parent continue to learn, and I as a provider continue to learn. So we are really, what I'll say is that there are so many issues that this pandemic has brought up. Of course, global issues, but I'll say on an individual basis, we're seeing how much the mind and the body need the sense of certainty, need connection, need routine, need exercise, and we're learning this in such a real way. Each of us individually are experiencing it, then we are seeing it in our kids. And I think, that if there is any silver lining, my hope is the silver lining makes us much more aware of how important those things are for our growth and our well-being, and that mental health is not something that some people have and some people do not have. That mental health is something you build and that you support and you work on as a part of a healthy lifestyle every day. And that, and I'm hoping if I can, I'll share everything I know about resilience, about what helps build that foundation, what helps build that healthy lifestyle, so that I can't say that we've ever said, yep, this is what to do in the case of a pandemic for kids. What I'll say though is that we know what to do when children and even adults are faced with challenge. We know what we usually recommend, we know what helps. And so I'll try to do my best to share that for you.
Thank you so much. And I just want to warn all of you that are with us this evening. The questions are long, so I'm going to read them as they were written, just so that we make sure that that are translated in the way that it was sent. And then Dr. Khanna, do your best to focus on what you think is most important there. I think what's interesting about this is just the sense that parents are desperately looking for some guidance and direction is amazing. I also think it's great that parents are looking for some answers, because the alternative is just to sit back and let things run their course, which in most cases is just not very productive. So I'm going to just dive in with the first question, and thank you to all of you that have sent questions. We actually got a number of them, and we just had to pick a couple for this evening. So the first question is, how can parents know how much the current behavior comes from the impact of the pandemic versus new environment or schedule versus some other third option? What are some tools and tactics to get our children to talk about what is worrying them or upsetting them, especially when they won't tell you and what they say is everything is fine?
So really interesting question. What I'm going to do is break this up into two parts. So the first one we'll speak to first, which is how can we identify which behaviors that we're seeing that might be new and might be negative, might be coming as a result of the pandemic versus just the lack of schedule and change in environment. So I'll take that one first. I don't know that we will be able to tease apart which behaviors are coming from worries about the pandemic versus what's happening as a result of being sort of taken off track and taken out of our routine. But what we know is our brains and our bodies do not like any sense of vulnerability, any sense that we do not know what comes next is always something where our sort of internal alarms, and I'll say for when I'm working with kids, I always say our fire alarm or our false alarm sometimes go off because we are we look for predictability, we look for certainty to make us feel safe, and anytime we're sensing that we don't have the answer for what's next, our body feels unsafe, and whenever it feels unsafe, those alarms go off more. So we would expect that from the sense of uncertainty that's come with the pandemic, the sense of vulnerability that has come with this sense that we don't know what we can do to keep ourselves safe necessarily, and that we have had isolation. Like I said before, our brains do not do well when it's isolated. It does better when we are social and we're laughing and we're connecting with others. And they don't do well without routines. Routines have that predictability that we need, and without that, it throws us off. Our regulation gets thrown off. Then, of course, without exercise, we are not doing as well. We can't come back as strong. We don't get some of that the good chemicals, the endorphins we need to kind of keep calm and confident. And so a combination of all of these things has happened as a result of the pandemic. And so we would expect that we are going to see more anxiety. We're going to see more agitation. For younger kids, it seems sometimes they get more irritable. They might seem, even you might notice a little bit of a regression, even that they might be acting more clingy than they used to be, maybe more tantrumy than they used to be. So we would expect to see that in this context. We would expect for older kids to be more withdrawn, more, you might see more low mood, more negative talk. And so I would imagine that it's a combination of both of those things, of the pandemic worry and of the change in environment. What I'll say is that the good news is, even though we don't know exactly which is responsible for what, that we do know that there are certain things to do to help with anxiety and agitation and low mood that will help either way. In terms of the second part of that question, which is what are the tools that we can use to get our kids to talk about what's upsetting them, what's worrying them, especially if they're likely to say, oh, everything's fine if you ask. What I'll say on that one is that this question, this is sort of a long game question. This is one where we have to really, not just short term, but long term also think about changing the general stance of, what I'll say is changing the ratio of the types of communications you're having. A lot of times parents, myself included, we feel our first instinct is to, when interacting with our kids, is to notice what we could help with, or what we could change, or what we could correct, or to remind them of something they're supposed to do. If we might go into problem solving if they bring up a problem. And what happens when you take that stance more often than not is that it generally makes it feel like that they're being put on the spot, or they're being their opinion, or what they are thinking, or what they're doing is getting corrected and judged. And so then that usually it makes them feel less likely to start just sort of expressing themselves openly. And so the changing the ratio means try to keep an eye on how often you're correcting versus how often you're just listening and repeating and laughing and empathizing. So if someone says, oh, I don't feel like doing homework, my eyes are tired from Zoom, rather than going in and saying, what about this? Will you, how about you take a break and go back to it later? I know, if you can just sort of sit and empathize for a little bit longer, and then not really go in and correct, how do we get homework done right away, it might help open up a little bit more time where they have the opportunity to express other thoughts and other feelings. If we cut them off when they say something is bothering them, whether it's frustration or anger or fear, we cut them off and start problem solving, it breaks off their habit of being able to talk freely. And so I will say, again, the long game is try to be waiting a little bit longer. I say 10-second rule. If they've said something, wait a little bit longer before you correct or before you solve the problem. And then after 10 seconds, listen some more. What are they offering as what they want to do next about this problem that they have? Or if they're frustrated, let's say with a friend, before you start suggesting things they could do to correct the problem, hear what they're thinking that they could do to what they have on their mind of what they want to do next. It might be that their suggestion is, oh, I don't think I want to talk to them anymore. And you sort of in the back of your mind know, oh, that's not the best way to approach this, but still wait. That waiting gives them this opportunity to test out their own approach. And then that gives them control. It gives them the sense that you trust that they have the ability to handle problems. And as soon as they get that feeling over time, what builds is a sense of trust that they can share, and the sense of confidence also. You're giving them confidence that you think that they know what to do. That opens up communication. Short term, I would say try not to say what's wrong or don't worry about it. Those are kind of quick, hey, let's handle this problem kind of prompts. So I would say, again, just sort of listen and repeat what they're saying, or try to say something that makes it sound like you get how hard something is. And then as long as you can, just wait to give them that opening to try to start talking. That's a longer question, but I hope I hit the main points there.
Thank you. It's just so interesting how you just made me feel guilty about not waiting before I respond. But what was really
I feel guilty too. I do it myself. So
what was interesting about that is the practicing of resilience just in waiting and allowing them to dig deeper. We live in such an on-demand instant world. They're expecting answers all the time, and that I can imagine, and I will practice this more, just waiting a little bit before you respond gives them a chance to dig a little bit deeper, and that resilience muscles get stretched a little bit. So I love that.
That's exactly right. And when you do, and I'll just add this, which is when they do come and ask you something, when you did get that nugget of asking for your advice on something, or just that they've expressed a concern, convey your values, certainly, of what you think about the situation, but try your best not to convey your fears about the situation. If you're saying that if you don't, then this might happen, or I really think it's important that you do X, Y, and Z, otherwise, A, B, and C will happen. You're really sort of now implanting your own worries into the conversation, and that might not be where they were. Their worry might be something completely different than what your worry was. So we'll ask you to, again, the wait is not just to open that up, it's also to give you a chance to hear what are they actually worried about, and meet them where they are, as opposed to meeting them, assuming that they are where you are. So I'll just leave it at that. I think it's tough. Like I said, I do it myself. I jump in, but I do try to catch it because I know how important it is to keep that line of communication open. And
just knowing, as you've unpacked it now, and being aware helps, I would imagine, helps you just see it when it happens. And so I think that awareness is really important for parents.
Yeah.
And
yeah, exactly.
the second question is a long one, so sit tight, but it's a good one. Many of our parents are concerned that the pandemic has created not just anxiety, but some OCD, phobias, sadness and depression, ADHD in their children. Do you have any tips on how to manage this, especially when there is so much negative or sad news out there? And we have to remind and encourage hand washing, hand sanitizing, mask wearing to keep them and those around them safe. How can parents be more compassionate and supportive of their child that is struggling with conditions?
Okay, so I'm going to break this one up also into the first section first, which is that parents are concerned that the pandemic has created not just some increase in anxiety and stress, but also maybe some OCD, some phobias, maybe depression in their kids, and how to manage this. So what I'll say is, I think that, again, we're talking about a continuum where it's not that they, we don't expect that it's that they had a condition and then they don't have a condition and then now they have a condition. What we expect is that there are things that have reinforced certain behaviors or certain thoughts, and that can exacerbate certain emotions. So anxiety can get exacerbated. Certainly worry about germs, contamination when there's an illness like coronavirus out there can absolutely be increased. And like I said, when our bodies are taken away from our routines and from our friends and social connection, low mood kicks in much faster. It can lead to a lot more negative cycles of reflecting and ruminating and thinking of what we don't have, sort of being in that space longer. So it can lead to, things that look like OCD and depression and other conditions. But we do believe that the same principles that we use to help kids who are struggling with those things outside of the pandemic are still going to be the same things that help kids who might be struggling just more as a result of what's happened during the pandemic. So we'll treat them sort of in the same way. So which is why I think one of the things I've been trying to do more recently with writing some of these books that are for parents is I think a lot of the principles that we do to help kids who are struggling in therapy, a lot of those same things can be done at home. And so, the Worry Workbook was one of our first attempts at trying to get some of those techniques and strategies into the hands of parents. And we're doing that again with the resilience recipe that's coming up. But I'll just say quickly, what we know maintains any kind of stress or any kind of negative pattern. Our job is always to try to see what we can do to not reinforce it, not exacerbate it, to try to minimize any behaviors that we are doing as parents that might be making things last longer or might not be helping as much. So one of the things, and Worry Workbook, if any of you are interested, you can certainly look there. There's some more details about it. But one of the things I talk about in that book is that when you spot a negative thought or a worry, let's say, a fear, that worry, your brain is going to be scanning for danger to make sure that it's protecting you. That's sort of what we're born with. We have this alarm system that it's designed to protect us, and usually it works really well. But when it notices any kind of uncertainty, which is, again, this time has brought up this feeling of uncertainty, if it notices uncertainty, it sort of heightens that alarm. So it goes off more often. And when it goes off, it scans for what is it? What could be wrong? And then it starts to think, well, this could go wrong and that could go wrong. And one of the things we try to do is help our kids see that, your brain is scanning for danger. But rather than thinking and noticing all of the possible things that could go wrong, we actually have a superpower. I call it a superpower for our kids. Our superpower is that we don't have to go with what the first thought was that we have. We actually have a choice to decide what we want to focus on. We can train our brains and our body to focus on the things that are going to lead to feeling better. And in this case, if it was a worry, we can focus on what we can do and what we know that we do have, as opposed to focusing on what we don't have or what we lost or what we can't do or what didn't go the way we wanted to. And so we talk a lot about building awareness of how they're thinking and what they're focused on, and making it that they're really learning how to shrink the amount of time going to anticipating negative things or anticipating a bad outcome, and spending more time thinking about what they do have, what they can do. So for example, if they're worrying about what if my grandparent gets sick, and then we can help them notice that thought and then choose to think about how great it is instead that they have these wonderful people who love them so much, and then think of what they can do the next time they see them or the next time they want to do a Zoom call. Spending that time thinking about what they do have and what they can do gives them that focus that is going to lead to much more feeling of empowerment, confidence, and calm. And the longer we can stretch those minutes, and the more we can shrink the minutes of worry, the less your body gives you that alarm. It actually learns that you're okay. It kind of cools down the system when you choose to do something instead of choose to anticipate something. That's one of our most powerful tools, so we do a lot of talking about self-talk and about how to think about how to be aware of what kind of thoughts are flying in. And we say things like, just because you thought it doesn't mean you think it, and having ways to help them get to the thought that's going to be the most useful, or the one that's going to be focused on what they can control. With news and talk, a lot of our conversations are about things that are out of our control. It's interesting because we are, as adults, we're doing the thing that we're trying to help our kids not do, which is spend too much time thinking about things that are out of our control. And actually, we're doing it. We are checking the news and talking about the news and, looking up information online. It feels like we're just trying to be informed when we're doing it. But really what we are doing, we're actually stuck in a little bit of a worry cycle too. We are feeling that anxiety, and we have this instinct that if I check or if I learn something, I might be able to fix it. I might find the thing I need to relieve this anxiety. But it's interesting that once we try to relieve it with more information, it's teaching our body that we're not okay. We are actually kind of sitting in that focus on what we on things that might go wrong in the future, instead of thinking about what we can do now. And so we're actually increasing our own anxiety every time we're checking the news too. So the less we are checking, the less we're talking about it. It's better for everyone. It's better for us. It's better for the kids, because again, those are not things, global rates are not really things that are in our control. We want to control the things that we can do. So I can wear a mask, I can wash my hands, but so limiting those minutes again is what we would recommend, and spending more minutes on something active that they can do. So writing a card to a healthcare worker, or helping make masks is something you can do, versus thinking and worrying about whether or not there's enough vaccine to go around right now. In terms of how to encourage hand washing and wearing face masks without causing anxiety, the way we're recommending talking about it is just having it be, it's sort of the tone and the way you're communicating. It will be in the zone of it being just self-care, sort of, the way we wear a seatbelt. It's just a good idea. We always put on our seatbelts. We're going to put on our masks. And so instead of having it be an emergency procedure, we're just talking about doing the thing that's a good idea and that's good for us, a healthy habit, a safe behavior, or self-care. So we, just how you're presenting the hand washing is, we're going to have to wear our mask, you have to sit this far. And then even doing some practice of how to say something to a friend, or or help them navigate social situations where they have to step back, again, not in a conveying your fears kind of way, like, oh, otherwise you might get sick, or otherwise we might all get sick. It would be it's a good idea to do this, and it's a good idea to do that, and here's what you say if someone forgets to do that. And you're just talking about it like it's good to wear a seatbelt. So I hope I got to all of the parts of that question. But let me know if you feel like there's pieces I can fill in.
That was really, really great. And I love, just because you thought it doesn't mean you think it. That's great. I'm going to definitely, I wrote that down because that really resonated with me. So thank you for unpacking that. That was great. The next question I wanted to share was, what are some effective communication tools parents can use when engaging with their children around topics such as schoolwork, homework, grades, etc.? How do you communicate effectively when your child doesn't seem to engage or only wants to argue? And I think this is an age-old question of just how do we do a really good job in that space?
Yes, this is sort of the $1 million question, and I'll say that again, this is a long game question too. We are wanting to change the direction, the style of communication a bit here. We are usually feeling a little anxiety ourselves about, what happens if they don't finish their schoolwork, what happens if they don't get good grades, and then that sort of manifests into how we communicate when we're talking about that with them. And then now what's happening is that the whole topic becomes associated with sort of a negative emotion. And so that's usually why it gets ignored or avoided by kids. I mean, anything that gets associated with a negative experience or a negative emotion, usually we all try to sort of stay away from it, not want to talk about it, or, feel like you look like we're not engaged, but really just trying to put that conversation away because it always brings up something uncomfortable. So the most effective tool that I'll reference something called a growth mindset with, I think all of us, now we've all heard that term many times, from the work of Carol Dweck, and there's, many people reference it. So I know we've all heard it, but it's particularly relevant for this part of our conversation. Growth mindset means that we are thinking and talking about where we are. If we are not finding ourselves where we want to be, then the approach would be best to say, I'm not there yet, as opposed to, well, I just can't, I don't have what it takes to get there. So a lot of times the alternative we call a fixed mindset, which is you're either smart or you're not smart. You're either, you're an A student or you're not an A student. We sometimes make the mistake of saying, oh, if you get an A, it means you worked really hard. And if you don't get an A, it kind of implies that you didn't work quite hard enough. Maybe if you worked a little harder. And so we fall into these traps. School kind of it's kind of the social context of school a bit, this good hard work equals good outcomes. And so we kind of share that same story in a way, and we want to stay away from making it too much of a fact of, oh, it must mean you didn't work hard enough. We want to get to, if you had trouble, it just means that it didn't quite click yet, but it will, and we'll try different ways, and it might not be exactly at the time that you needed it to click, like on Thursday's exam, but it will click, and we will get there. And so if we can all kind of come from that, then you'll notice your communication about homework changes a bit. Even how your tone and your approach and your body language, and then again, that opens up that sense of confidence that that you have no doubt that they want to do well. You have no doubt that they are trying. A lot of times that's what kids read when we give that body language that we're anxious or upset with their study habits. They read that we are thinking they're not trying. But we assume that they're trying. We assume they're coming from a place of really wanting to do well. And when there's a hiccup or when there's something that's really challenging, their instinct might be to try to avoid it or try to underplay it and not talk about it with you. It makes sense. We all do that in a certain way. But like I said, communicating that it's just a matter of, a little more time with understanding it. Maybe you can even ask the teacher to spend time, if something didn't go well, spend a few minutes explaining it again. And then sort of saying that that they'll get there, the more they practice, the easier it will get. Sometimes I've said, if I'm talking to a fifth grader, for example, I'll mention, if you took a second grade test, it would be really easy. But that wouldn't feel that easy for the second grader. It's just because it's the first time you've seen it. It's hard, when you're learning something new, it's always a little more challenging, but we'll get there. And so then again, you're opening up the conversation. So that's sort of one thing I would say that's in the back of all of these conversations. But the other thing I'll say is there's, of course, a healthy habit of a routine of, knowing sort of that you come home from school, you have a snack, you do homework, you go to your sport, and then you pack up and bedtime. That routine, if it's always there, it helps to make approaching the homework or approaching the uncomfortable thing a little bit easier, because it's just sort of part of the routine. If it becomes that if you don't have homework, then you have screen time, then you can imagine that, or any time, it doesn't have to be screens, but that's kind of what a lot of our kids are doing when they're free. Then it becomes almost like it becomes harder to get to homework next time, because you've sort of experienced again, it's so powerful. Relief is so powerful as a reinforcer. So having to ask them to get out of that habit is much harder than sort of building in the habit of just, if they don't have homework, doing a little reading during that time. It's a good way to just get out of that conversation about, what's for homework, did you finish it, and no computers today. That conversation is so hard, and it's exhausting for everyone. And again, assuming they're trying and making it as easy as possible for them to get there.
I love how practical but also deliberate those suggestions are. And I think that's one of the things I'm taking away from what you're saying, is that it does need some consistent and deliberate approach. So I really love that. I'm going to ask Steph if you could open up for people to just submit a question or two. But in the meantime, Dr. Khanna, I get so excited, and I know we're biased because we're in the summer camp space, and we have students from as young as you can get to up to entering college.
Yeah.
A couple of parents have shared, and I get, as I said, so excited when they say they can't wait for summer because of the opportunity just to have all that I think we believe that summer camp would bring, that experience to socialize, a little bit of a less worried, a freer environment. Can you speak to that a little bit? Just, what you anticipate an experience like that would do for students, coming out of the school system as it is right now, where some people are in person and some people are still virtual. And also, you mentioned a little bit earlier just how important the social and the exercise and just those bits are. So I'd love to hear some of those thoughts. And Steph, if you get any questions, you can cue them up for us.
Yeah, I think summer camp is going to be a real gift this year. They are, it's sort of exactly what they've been missing almost, this sort of outdoor play, exercise, and social connection. So I think it's going to be more important than ever, really, to have this kind of structured experience and this time dedicated to just being outside and, being with their friends. I think there might be a little bit that some families might find that some of their kids who have not been in school this year might have a little bit of a transition problem early on. They might see some bumps because, again, just like relief is powerful away when you get away from homework, the screens are very powerful reliefs. That's kind of it happens with being away from anything. Your body sort of reads when you are away from people, or when you're away from crowds, or when you're away from your normal routine. Even adults are going to feel this when they have to go back to work and get, have that morning routine come up again, where they're getting ready and getting in their cars for the morning commute. That, just because we haven't done that, we've been sort of in a away from that zone. Our bodies are going to actually feel uncomfortable going back to that. It's going to feel more relief being at home, even though we want out. We all want out. The kids want out. We want to get back to work, and we want to see our friends and family. But it's still, our bodies will still feel uncomfortable. So I suspect we're going to have some kids having trouble leaving home, getting out the door, getting motivated to wake up at that time. I know they're waking up for school, but still there's something about being in your living room or in your kitchen versus being out somewhere, by that time. But, just I would recommend staying cool and kind of patient with it. It might be that they'll take small steps towards getting in all the way. It might be a very quick Band-Aid kind of experience, where the first couple of days and then they're back to normal. But some kids might take a little bit longer to readjust. Some kids might have a little bit more anxiety about social experiences. They've been out of practice of sort of social communication, just that whole the context of being in a group where you don't know kids. Summer camp often brings that up anyway, because there's sort of new kids that you don't see every day. This might be a little bit even more anxiety provoking than usual, because now we've been out of practice of that at school, and now we've got some new kids. So we might see a little bit of that, but I just sort of, I'll say I recommend everybody stay the course and kind of take it slow, take small steps. You might practice at home a little bit, inviting with all the precautions you think are appropriate. Have smaller groups so that they are practicing some of that social interaction and face-to-face or in-person conversations. If that's possible, you might even go visit the camp and kind of get used to it. So different things can be done, but I would just say stay the course. Their body's getting adjusted. And if there's one thing we benefit from as therapists, it's that we know our bodies adjust. And so if we can kind of keep moving towards the thing that's uncomfortable, we will get there. Again, our superpower is that we are good at getting there.
Thank you. And I think what's so important is not only what parents potentially could experience. I think it's so great that you shared that. But it's part of the reason we're excited that you're part of our team, helping our staff orientate, going through orientation, and even just explaining them that they may see some of that behavior and how to respond to that. So I think everybody being prepared and just thoughtful about how we welcome all these students into an environment that's a little bit different than they've had for the last at least year is really, really important. Thank you for saying that. Steph, do you have any questions for us?
So we don't have any questions yet. For those that are in attendance, you can enter a question in the Q&A feature that pops up on your toolbar. While we wait, for that, Dr. Khanna, and thank you so much, for doing this. I have 2 kids of my own. They actually just started back full time this week.
Oh, nice.
And so we have been talking about, are there things that are triggering them? Are there areas of concern? Just to kind of keep that conversation open. So this has been extremely valuable to me, and I'm sure all the parents in attendance. So thank you.
I'm so glad.
But while we're waiting to see if there are questions, you did talk about one great takeaway about, staying the course, doing some practicing, at home in preparation for camp. But are there maybe 1 or 2 other, takeaways, nuggets that, that our parents could leave today and, try to activate, this week or next week in the near future?
Yeah, so I would say, so there's a couple of things. One is that I would have some playtime. I know that sounds silly because they've been at home and it seems like you're playing a lot, but I would have some deliberate playtime where you're opening up, again, an opportunity for some conversation. And, we've all experienced that the phenomenon that happens in the back when you're driving and they're in the back seat and they're talking. So see if you can kind of carve out some time to have one-on-one, if you have multiple kids, time. If back seat works best, then that's okay. Or if just playing, putting a Lego thing together, or, gardening, or whatever you all enjoy doing together, just, one-on-one, setting up some of those moments to try to have some conversations. I think, without forcing them, just sort of opening up opportunities, I think that'll be great. You can kind of tap into what's happening. And then the practice of doing those things, of getting back into a routine. So if there is some new transition happening, waking up at the time and getting dressed at the time, and having some homework, having some chores, things that are sort of back to, what their normal routine was like. I think doing that in small steps sometimes helps the transition. The other thing, I guess, is if I were to summarize the long goal, the long-term goal, is that we really want our kids to feel like they know what to do when a challenge comes up, whatever the challenge is. In this context, we're talking about the challenge of this pandemic, but whatever challenge comes up for them, we want them to feel like they know what to do. And it's not that we will have the solution. It's not that we know what the way to fixing this problem or how to achieve the goal they want. We don't have all the answers anyway. But what we do have is I'll break it into three things. We want to have real awareness, teach them about awareness of their own self-talk. I think I use that word a lot. Inner voice, sometimes people call it. What you're saying to yourself or what your thoughts are saying. I think having a heightened level of awareness of what that sounds like will help them get that distance from those words and the emotion, if that makes sense. So what we're saying to ourselves is usually the thing that's causing whatever we're feeling after that. And so we assume that that's just how we feel because that's just how it is. And I would think I think it's really valuable for kids to know that the feeling that comes is coming as a result of a lot of different things. What you might have thought in that moment might not be what you would choose to think in that moment. And so to get a minute to decide what you think about it instead of just going with your first instinct, will give them a lot of control over what happens next, over their immediate choice of their thought, gives them control and some choice over their emotion, which then will give them some choice of what happens next. So they're going to end up, we want them to be in the driver's seat. We want them to say, I know what I want to have happen here, and this is what I think. My body alarm might go off, or I might feel really anxious about this, but I know that this is what I'm going to do about it when it comes, as opposed to, oh my God, my alarm went off, I'm not going, and just kind of going with that approach. So I would say, point number one is help them to build awareness and that distance from that first instinct to what they can do, what they can choose, and the amount of choice they have in deciding the approach of how they've thought about something. And the second thing is, someone brought it up when it talked about how to be compassionate about conditions. This is so important that we all have to be very compassionate about not just our children and what they're going through, but for ourselves. And we want to teach them self-compassion too. We want them to know when there's a bad day that it's not a flaw, it's not a failure, it's not a, something they could have done better, is not the way we want to think about it. We want to just observe it like that was a hard day, and there's no judgment. We all have good days, we all have bad days, we all have good choices we make some bad choices. These are learning experiences. And so we grow from all of it, so good and bad. And so I'll say the language of awareness and the language of compassion, as much as you can kind of throw that into your everyday, the way you're processing out loud, that modeling of that, and that, using that while you're helping them to navigate things, will really give them a lot more control over what's happening in their day-to-day experience. So those are two things. And then the third thing is the thing I kind of mentioned before about approaching things that are difficult. Know for sure that whenever we face a challenge, whenever there is a challenge, it's not that some people are able to handle it and some people are not. It's sort of how much discomfort are we willing to tolerate to get there? What are we willing? It's not, I always say it's not that people are just more brave. It's that they're scared and willing to do it anyway. And so we want our kids to also know it's okay to feel scared. We're just going to try to get there anyway. We're going to do what we can. And then the more you do it, the easier it gets. And then at some point, your alarm's going off less and less. And if you really start thinking about how to if you generalize that to a lot of situations, think of then how many places you can feel confident over time. So I'll just say that if there's a question about should I try it or should I not, go with the yes, let's try it. And I don't know how it's going to go. I don't know if you'll have any friends there. I don't know if you'll have fun at the party. I don't know if anybody will talk to you at camp, but let's go anyway. I think, it will learn from it. We'll learn what you like and what you don't like, and what you want to do more of and what you don't want to do more of. Let's go towards it. And if you kind of live this way of going towards the thing, you'll notice you're building that resilience in them. Over time, you'll notice it's starting to stack up, and that's kind of as good as it gets in terms of helping them be prepared for challenges. So,
thank you, Dr. Khanna. That's really those are really great takeaways and things that we can implement sooner rather than later. We have a question that a parent that came up while you were talking. And I think it actually plays into, a couple of things that you said in terms of building real self-awareness, also that self-compassion.
yeah.
We have a parent that has a middle schooler who, recently started to procrastinate on projects, getting harder. And now, obviously she wants to get them done well. She wants to perform well, but she also feels a little bit lost, and I'm sure a lot of students are feeling that in this virtual type of environment. But she is, she clearly is hard on herself. She's disappointed. She's frustrated. And, parent wants to know how to help her and how to support her.
So, procrastination is another sort of thing I'll mention. Is not usually we think it's just, sometimes we think it's either bad time management or that they're kind of preferring the easier thing of like watching a show instead of starting the thing that is hard. A lot of times actually we see that procrastination comes when you have someone who's really interested in doing well, someone who's got high expectations, and then that bumps up against a fear of failure, and then that's where that stuckness sometimes comes. And so what can we do about that is usually first is that conversation or the style of conversation about outcome that can change, which is that there's no such thing as failure. We're just learning, that the outcome of this project is not defining your intelligence. I know how smart you are. We're just showing a little bit of, we're learning something new. We're going to show them what we've learned. And if there's more to learn, we'll learn more. And then the approach, how to get someone to approach something, like I was saying before, go towards the thing that's uncomfortable. Sometimes it helps to take it into smaller pieces. And so if you can help break down the task, that sometimes makes it into morsels that are small enough to start going towards these more difficult projects. And then that helps something that seems overwhelming start to feel more manageable. And then once you have one or two under your belt like that, it will lead to more and more independence and, you know, longer projects and being able to manage time better. So I would just sort of switch the conversation about outcome of these projects and not be too, you know, again, communicating fear that you might, that if you don't do a good job, this is going to hurt your future kind of conversation. But rather than kind of go to, well, we're just, you know, we're showing them what you know. It's a big project. It's hard. If it doesn't come out, you know, your grade doesn't turn out how you want, it's okay. You know, you'll have lots of other projects coming up later. But let's break it up into smaller chunks and see what we can do. Sometimes breaking up environment, how you're kind of planning your time helps. Doing it in the library sometimes helps versus doing it in the kitchen, if that's where sometimes old difficult conversations have happened about projects. Sometimes getting another friend involved in working on a project can break it up a little bit. Again, anything to try to sort of start the step towards the thing in the smallest, and think of this as, you know, projects over the course of life, not how do I get there today, you know, or this weekend. Because if it doesn't work out this weekend, it will, you know, these small steps will still get you where you need to go. So, you know, slow and steady, the goal being, how do I break it into small enough chunks that it's approachable, and then she's not afraid of failure, and that we're breaking out of some old cycles about projects and old ways of thinking about projects as much as we can, and see if that can get her to that next step. It's hard without, you know, knowing the specifics, but that's sort of a general approach.
Thank you. Thank you, Jack, so much for that. So we are at 7:58, you know, and I think that, you know, this was so wonderful. Again, thank you so much, Dr. Khanna. We really
Thank you.
appreciate you taking the time out of your schedule to spend with us. You know, we did record this session, so we will make this available to all of you as attendees, but we will also make it available to those that couldn't join us this evening. I don't know if you have any parting words, but, you know, on behalf of, you know, Michael and Steve and the entire team at ESF, we really thank you so much, and really appreciate you quite a bit.
Thank you so much. No, I mean, no, but my only parting words is that, you know, the fact that you all are here and that you all are doing this, and all the parents who are here, the fact that you're even thinking in this way is already, you're way ahead of the game, and you're heading in the right direction, and so are your kids. So thank you. Thanks for letting me be part of it.
Dr. Khanna, I want to just say thank you as well. A lot of what you shared tonight was not only applicable to my children, but was certainly applicable to me and my wife as well. So I think it is not just for the children. And I think I'll make sure that we send a link to both to your book, and when your second one comes out, a link to that as well. So if anybody's interested in looking at those resources, that they can find them very easily.
Yeah.
So I just also want to echo what Stephanie said. Thank you for your time, and thank you to all of you that took the time to be with us tonight. I hope this was meaningful, and that you've got some takeaways that you can ponder this evening and roll out it to you and your family.